Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when a single country decides to tighten its grip on a resource the entire world depends on? Not oil, not gas, but silver. A metal most people still think of as jewelry or coins, yet one that quietly powers the modern world. Because silver is not optional anymore. It sits inside your phone, your laptop, electric vehicles, medical equipment, and the solar panels driving the global energy transition. And right now, as we close out 2025, China is preparing to make a move that could reshape the global silver market in ways most people are not ready for. This is not hype. This is not speculation. This is structural change. As we move into January 2026, China is implementing new export controls on silver that, while not officially labeled a ban, function dangerously close to one. Beginning January 1st, only 44 Chinese companies will be legally permitted to export silver. If a company is not on that list, exports stop completely. No exceptions. No workarounds. That number may sound generous at first glance, but in reality it concentrates control into a very small, state-approved group. The message is clear. China is no longer allowing the market to decide where its silver goes. China will decide. To understand why this matters, we need to understand what silver actually is in today's world. Silver is the most electrically conductive metal on Earth. Nothing performs better. That is why it is embedded in almost every modern technology. Smartphones rely on silver for circuit connections. Data centers depend on it for efficient power flow. Electric vehicles use silver in battery systems, wiring, and charging infrastructure. And solar energy, arguably the backbone of the green transition, depends heavily on silver paste to convert sunlight into electricity. Without silver, efficiency drops sharply. This is not theoretical demand. It is real and accelerating. Global silver production sits around 800 to 900 million ounces per year. Yet demand has been climbing relentlessly. Industrial use alone has surged by double digits in recent years, driven by solar, EVs, AI infrastructure, and medical applications. Supply, however, is not keeping up. New mines take years, sometimes decades, to bring online. Grades are falling, costs are rising. And now one of the world's largest producers is tightening the tap. China is the second largest silver producer globally, trailing only Mexico. It accounts for roughly 13 to 15% of global supply and exports over 100 million ounces annually. That silver flows into global manufacturing chains, refineries, and investment markets. By restricting who can export, China is effectively reducing accessible supply without ever announcing a reduction. It is a surgical move, quiet, technical, and incredibly powerful. This is not China's first time using resource control as leverage. We have seen this playbook before: rare earth elements, gallium, germanium, antimony, tungsten. Each time, the justification is the same: national security and strategic interests. And each time, the global market reacts with shock, price volatility, and eventually restructuring. What makes silver different is that it sits at the intersection of finance, technology, and energy. It is not easily replaceable, and it is consumed, not just stored. Behind this decision lies geopolitics. Trade tensions between China and the United States remain unresolved. Technology restrictions, semiconductor bans, and tariffs have created a tit-for-tat environment. When the West restricts technology, China restricts materials. Silver is now part of that equation. It is used in advanced defense systems, radar technology, missiles, and aerospace applications. Controlling silver exports is not just an economic decision, it is a strategic one. What makes this situation even more revealing is what is happening inside China's own market. Physical silver in China has been trading at massive premiums compared to global spot prices. In some cases, reports show local prices exceeding $100 per ounce, while international markets hover far lower. That gap is not speculation, it is scarcity. It reflects domestic demand overwhelming available supply. When premiums rise like that, it is the market screaming that something is wrong beneath the surface. Even Elon Musk has publicly warned about silver shortages, pointing directly at the impact this could have on electric vehicles and renewable energy. Tesla depends on silver. So does every major EV manufacturer. When someone like Musk raises concerns, it is not noise. It is supply chain reality. For the United States, this situation exposes a vulnerability that has been building for years. Domestic silver production exists, particularly in states like Nevada and Alaska, but it is nowhere near sufficient to meet demand. The US relies heavily on imports, either directly or indirectly, for refined silver. As China tightens exports, competition for remaining supply intensifies. That competition drives prices higher, not because of speculation, but because availability is shrinking. Analysts are already projecting silver prices well beyond current levels if these restrictions hold. Some forecasts point to triple-digit silver by mid-2026 under sustained supply pressure. For investors holding physical silver or mining equities, this creates opportunity. For manufacturers, it creates stress. Rising input costs ripple through supply chains. Solar installations become more expensive. EV production costs rise. Consumer electronics face pricing pressure. Inflation does not just come from money printing, it comes from material shortages. But this is not purely a negative story. Pressure forces adaptation. Mexico, the world's largest silver producer, stands to benefit. Peru, Poland, Australia, and Canada are all positioned to expand output. In the United States, mining companies could see renewed investment as policymakers begin to understand the risks of over-reliance on foreign supply. Recycling also becomes more attractive. Silver is highly recyclable, and secondary supply could grow significantly if prices remain elevated. This moment mirrors past resource shocks. When China restricted rare earth exports in 2010, prices exploded and the world panicked. But that panic led to diversification, innovation, and eventually balance. Silver may follow a similar path, but the difference today is demand growth. Solar alone is projected to consume 200 million ounces annually by the end of the decade. Add AI infrastructure, EVs, and medical demand, and the pressure becomes structural, not cyclical. There is also an environmental and social dimension to this story. Silver mining is resource-intensive and environmentally sensitive. Water usage, chemical processing, and land disruption create real consequences. If production shifts rapidly to regions with weaker regulations, the environmental cost could rise. At the same time, mining booms bring jobs and economic growth to local communities. Managing that balance will be critical. Stepping back, what we are witnessing is resource nationalism in a multipolar world. China is no longer simply a manufacturing hub. It is a gatekeeper. And as global supply chains fragment, resilience becomes more important than efficiency. Countries that recognize this early will adapt. Those that do not will feel the consequences through higher costs, slower innovation, and increased volatility. For investors, silver's dual role as both an industrial metal and a monetary asset makes it uniquely positioned. When financial confidence weakens, silver benefits. When industrial demand rises, silver benefits. Few assets sit at that crossroads. Volatility will remain high, and paper markets will continue to distort short-term price action, but physical fundamentals are tightening regardless of sentiment. This is not a call to panic, it is a call to awareness. China's silver export controls are not an isolated event. They are part of a broader shift in how strategic materials are managed in a world defined by competition rather than cooperation. Whether you are an investor, a manufacturer, or simply someone curious about how the modern world really works, this matters, because silver is no longer just a metal. It is leverage, it is security, and increasingly, it is power. If you found this breakdown valuable, share your thoughts below. How do you see this playing out? Do prices surge, or does the world adapt faster than expected? And as always, stay informed, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, here's where the story gets even more interesting, because what China is doing with silver is not happening in isolation. It fits into a much larger global shift that most people still don't see clearly. For decades, the world operated under a simple assumption: raw materials would always be available on the global market, and if supply tightened in one place, another producer would step in. That assumption is quietly breaking down. What we are moving into now is an era where access matters more than price, and control matters more than efficiency. China understands this better than almost anyone. Over the last 15 years, it has systematically positioned itself at key choke points in global supply chains. Rare earths were the first wake-up call. Then came battery metals, processing capacity, and now critical industrial inputs like silver. By restricting exports through licensing, rather than outright bans, China avoids triggering immediate retaliation while still achieving the same result: reduced global availability and increased leverage. It is a strategy designed not for headlines, but for influence. What makes silver especially sensitive is the way the global market is structured. The silver market is not primarily a physical market. It is a paper market layered on top of a relatively small physical base. Futures contracts, ETFs, unallocated accounts, and derivatives represent claims on silver that far exceed the amount of metal actually available for delivery. The system functions only as long as most participants never ask for the metal itself. Confidence keeps the machinery running. But when physical supply tightens, that confidence becomes fragile. As Chinese exports slow, refiners outside China will feel the pressure first. They rely on consistent inflows of raw and semi-processed silver. When those flows become uncertain, inventories shrink. When inventories shrink, premiums rise. And when premiums rise, a silent signal is sent through the market. Physical silver is becoming harder to secure. That signal rarely shows up immediately in futures prices. Instead, it appears in delivery delays, widening spreads, and rising costs for industrial buyers. This is why you can see a strange disconnect at times. Paper silver prices falling while physical silver becomes more expensive. To casual observers, this looks like a contradiction. In reality, it is a warning. Paper markets reflect leverage and sentiment. Physical markets reflect reality. When the two diverge, it means the system is under strain. Industrial users cannot wait for price discovery to resolve itself. A solar manufacturer cannot tell customers, "Sorry, we'll install your panels next year when silver prices stabilize." An EV manufacturer cannot halt production because futures markets are volatile. These industries secure supply ahead of time, often at higher prices, because downtime costs far more than metal. This is where price becomes secondary to availability. As this dynamic accelerates, we may begin to see strategic stockpiling outside China as well. Governments rarely admit it publicly, but history shows that when supply chains become unreliable, stockpiles grow. This further removes metal from circulation, compounding the shortage. Each ounce pulled into long-term storage increases pressure on the remaining supply, and that pressure feeds back into premiums and volatility. Another layer most people overlook is the impact on the financial system itself. Banks and institutions with large paper-silver exposure depend on smooth contract rollovers. When physical backing becomes questionable, risk managers tighten requirements, margins rise, liquidity thins. At that point, even small price moves can trigger forced selling or emergency interventions. We have already seen glimpses of this in sudden, aggressive paper sell-offs during low liquidity trading hours. These moves are not about fundamentals. They are about control. But control becomes harder when physical reality pushes back. You cannot print silver. You cannot create it with policy. And you cannot substitute it easily without years of research and infrastructure changes. This is why silver shortages matter far more than most people realize. They don't just affect one industry. They ripple outward, touching energy policy, technological progress, and economic stability. Looking ahead, the timeline is critical. In the short term, markets may downplay China's move, calling it temporary or manageable. And this is typical. Markets are conditioned to expect intervention and adaptation. But over the medium term, as contracts renew and inventories are drawn down, the impact becomes unavoidable. By late 2026, we could be looking at a very different silver market than the one we know today, one defined less by speculative trading and more by physical scarcity. Longer term, the world will adapt. New mines will be developed. Recycling will increase. Technologies will reduce silver intensity where possible. But adaptation takes time, and time is the one thing tight supply chains do not offer freely. In the meantime, volatility will be the price of adjustment. This is why it is so important to separate narrative from structure. The narrative says markets are flexible and self-correcting. The structure says silver is finite, demand is rising, and control is concentrating. When narrative and structure collide, structure always wins. At its core, this story is not about China versus the West. It is about a global system transitioning from abundance to constraint. For decades, efficiency was the goal. Now, resilience is becoming the priority. That shift changes how resources are valued, how investments are made, and how power is exercised. Silver, quietly and without fanfare, has become one of the clearest examples of this transition. Not because it is rare, but because it is indispensable. Not because it is glamorous, but because it is everywhere. And when something that essential becomes constrained, the effects are felt far beyond the commodity market. So as we move into 2026, pay attention not just to prices, but to behavior. Watch export policies, watch inventory reports, watch physical premiums, watch how governments and corporations respond, not what they say. Because the real story is unfolding beneath the headlines, one shipment, one license, and 1 ounce at a time. And in a world where control over resources increasingly defines power, silver is no longer just a metal